Hello, friends. My name is Jonah and welcome to another episode of Discourse in Magic with Nate Staniforth. Nate is a creator, he's a performer, and he's a writer. He recently published two books, one for muggles, laymen, non-magicians, called Here is Real Magic, about his disillusionment through magic and his road to find that back and to be reawakened, and another book called Clouds and Kingdoms, which is his book for magicians, full of tricks and essays. Both of those books are awesome, and both of those books were the subject of this podcast episode, amongst other things. And I basically quizzed him on some of the things in his book to better understand it. And a lot of these were emotional aspects, emotional elements. So we talked about disillusionment and what magicians can and should do if they're struggling with that. We talk about like your inner voice and your intent when you're performing and when you're, writing and things like that. And we also talk about some of the more uncomfortable topics in magic, like how magic sometimes makes you feel uncomfortable and what that feeling is and what we're playing with. So it was a really incredible episode. I think you're going to love it. And about 3 days ago, before this came out, Nate sent me a message and he said, do you want to do a coupon code for the people from Discourse in Magic for Clouds and Kingdoms? And I said, sure. So if you go to cloudsandkingdomsbook.com and you use the coupon code discourse, then you get 15% off. And I don't get any commissions or anything like that. You just get a cool discount for being a fan of this podcast. So I think you're going to like the episode. Here it is with Nate Staniforth. Hello, friends, and welcome to Discourse in Magic. I am here with the one and only Nate Staniforth. Nate, how are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me on.
I'm super excited to have you. And one of the things I was just chatting about before we press record is how cool it is that I get to interview people whose books I read, which is super, super fun. And I just finished Clouds and Kingdoms and Here is Real Magic. And they were both amazing and stuff that I'm excited to dive into, maybe some nitty gritties of both of those books as well. Let's start at the beginning. How did you get into magic? How did you get started in this?
For me, it was an accident. When I was a little kid, I read the books, the Lord of the Rings books. They were movies later, but I read the book version first. When I finished, 9 is a curious age because you're old enough to slog through, maybe 1,300 pages of Lord of the Rings, but young enough at the end of that process to still maybe believe that there is such a thing as actual supernatural magic in the world. So I went to the library looking for I was looking for a book of spells. I don't know if you've seen the movies or read the books, but there's that scene right at the beginning where Gandalf the wizard terrifies everyone at the birthday party with this magical fireworks dragon, and everyone was running and screaming. And I thought, if I could do that on the playground, I would be unstoppable. And I was very interested in being unstoppable. So I went to the library looking for a book of spells, and turns out that's not how it works, but I found a book of sleight of hand instead.
In the lore of magicians finding their ways into magic, there is a small percentage of us who get in that way. I am not one of them. I'm an uncle story, but it is so amazing that, we have those moments. And did you find yourself disappointed?
It was a disorienting experience for me because two things happened that changed my life forever. The first was that for whatever reason, I just became really fixated on this idea of taking one trick and making it perfect. The illusion that I remember learning from that book was just a basic coin vanish, but in the way that, how kids just latch on to things, whether it's sports or video games. For me, it was this coin trick. And I just became obsessed with it. I remember I'd stand in front of the bathroom mirror practicing before school and after school over and over and over again. And I mean, and your listeners know, the curious thing about magic tricks is when you push them all the way to the point of excellence, they stop looking like tricks and they start looking like magic. And there was a point as a little kid where, I'd close my hand and open my hand and the coin would just disappear. It didn't look like a trick. It looked like it just vanished. And I wanted to see how people would respond to this when I did it for them on the playground. And I mean, you've done magic for people, and you know that sometimes so much depends on the context and the setting.
Hmm.
And the kids at school, they didn't know they were watching a magic trick. They did it to be entertainment, you know. I hadn't thought through any of this. I just made the coin disappear. But because they didn't have that context, they didn't know how to internalize. So they just anyway, I've spent a lot of time trying to understand what exactly happened on the playground that day.
Right.
But the end of the story is that the kids saw the coin disappear and they just started screaming and running. So the
Hmm.
teacher comes over to see what's going on, and I was terrified of this woman. She was sort of a authoritarian, domineering presence at the school, and I remember when she asked me to show her whatever I showed the kids to make them scream and run away. When I showed her the coin vanish and I looked up, it was as if she had become a kid again. And that really upset me. It's easy to imagine a teacher being astonished by magic and have that be a good story. And you know, I'm glad that she was amazed by it, but it really confused me. Because I knew it was just a trick. I knew that I was just a scared little kid. And yet something as simple as this coin trick could create this unfathomable change in her demeanor and her comportment.
It's so interesting you saying that it upset you, right? And you've brought up other times talking about some of the other times I'm talking about in the books and in interviews and stuff, some of the like unsettling parts of magic and things that make you feel uncomfortable that have to do with adults or grown-ups and how they are not experiencing this type of feeling, or that something like this can have that type of feeling. Like it feels like something that most people who get into magic are drunk with power, like why does it upset you?
Yeah, I mean, and let's be clear, I loved that part of it too. It's just an incredible feeling as a 9-year-old to be able to make the adults in your world go a little crazy. But
Yeah,
it's also really confusing because they are supposed to be in control and they're supposed
right.
to have the answers. And I remember part of my worry being like, I understood how little it took to flip, sort of to pull the rug out from under them. And I didn't know what to do with it.
It's like the first moment you see your parents as being human or something like that. Like you realize adults aren't, these all-knowing
Yeah.
people as a kid. So let's continue along the journey. One point I'm always really enthralled by in people's journey is the decision to take magic up as a career, because it's a fabulous hobby and it's a lot of fun, but the society points us all in the direction of getting a real job. So walk me through when that decision happened and how you made it.
So I think I feel differently about magic. I have been a magician longer than I can remember, but I don't recall a time thinking that it was particularly fun. Like it wasn't it's not something that I ever did as a sort of recreation in the way one might read books or play games. It was never a form of diversion for me. It's almost as though with those early experiences doing magic for people, I feel like I got to see something. I felt like I had a clue about what's really going on. And I wanted to chase that. That felt like the teacher's response. And then, when I showed my parents, and over the next year, I did a lot of magic for people. And the reactions captivated me, and I did not understand why I was getting the responses that I was getting, and I wanted to figure that out. I wanted to just chase that as hard as I could. Like it was never a choice to become a professional magician. I don't ever remember deciding this is what I'm going to do. It's like I've always just known, people can do whatever they want with their lives, but this is for me. This is why I'm here. This is what I'm doing. So I don't I don't know how to answer your question because I never sat down with a legal pad and planned out
Right.
the pros and cons of should I go pro or not. It was in my mind and in my life, that's been my only option since I was 9.
Part of that stuff really resonates with me. This idea of just like, it's just this other thing I do. Like, I love when you said I never really enjoyed magic. Like, but that part really resonates with me. Like, it feels like it's just another thing that I do in my life. I eat every day. I brush my teeth. I have to do laundry every week. And I'm a magician
Right.
also. And I
Right.
do magic as well. And like, I think the learning and performing and doing of magic, I think I got more fulfillment than joy, you know? Like I don't know that it's joy that I got. So that's really
And
interesting.
just to be clear, Jonah, I love it. I love it so much
Yeah,
that
yeah,
I
yeah.
don't even wanna talk to you about how much I love
Yeah.
it. Like, it's such a personal thing, but in the way that, like, real love also carries responsibility and
Mhm.
duty and obligation with it. I feel like my relationship with magic is far more like a long friendship than it has ever felt like something to do on the weekend.
It's almost like someone saying like it's a job or it's a hobby is like so foreign. Like it's not even that. Let's turn gears a little bit and talk about some of the magic that you do. And something that really strikes me about the magic that I've seen you perform, read that you've done, and understood that you've talked about is that you've sort of cut out a lot of the jokes and the gags and the I'm really interested by this for a few reasons. The first thing is one of the things that I crave in doing magic is this sense of togetherness and unity. And like, I love doing intimate performances more than stage performances. Only because of the closeness. Like if I'm doing magic for people, I'll get them all to gather together in a group, and I know that's how you like end a lot of your shows. And one thing I'm always thinking about is like, are we distracting away from the magic by doing magic and comedy or magic and music or magic or whatever it is, and should we be focused on just like making this experience to give people this like moment of wonder, this whole thing that's unique to this art? So it's something that is really exciting me about like not doing jokes and gags and whatever. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Let me start by saying I'm not judging anybody, and you have to wear the suit that fits. And I went through a lot of phases as a magician before I learned how to be the best version of myself on stage. And so, for some people, they are able to get the closest to their vision of what they want magic to feel like with comedy or with a more theatrical approach that uses music and lighting. But for me, my only interest when I'm on stage and my only agenda, my only job, my only responsibility is making the hair stand up on the back of the necks of the audience. If they want comedy, they should go to somebody else's show. If they want special effects or theatricality, there are plenty of other acts that can offer that. The thing that I love about magic and the thing that I care most to share with the audience is that sense of just being struck dumb with awe and wonder and the great David Berglis talks about it as flipping a switch, and how you can take an audience from their normal daily lives and then through the craft of magic flip this incredible breaker in their brains that just causes everything to explode. And I love that. I love doing that on stage because if I go back and think in my own life about those experiences that have been most important to me, it's they wouldn't be moments where I have felt entertained, with a capital E. They've been moments where I've been forced to stand in front of and confront and think about and consider, the unfathomable mystery of existence, and that we were here, and that we all are here to be a part of it together. And you can find that anywhere. You can find it in music or movies or basketball or poetry or mountaintops, or it's more about um, how you look than where you look. But my love of magic comes from the realization that you can also get there with magic tricks, and that's what I care about.
Right. And it's something so cool about this tool that we can carry in like our pockets can give the same experience as like pondering in the cosmos or watching a movie or whatever it is that gives us that sort of wonder that you're talking about.
And it's such an efficient way to do it too. I went in after I wrote Here Is Real Magic. I worried that I had spoken about magic in such a honest, but I presented magic as I see it, which is this almost transcendent experience for for people. And I worried
Right.
that people would read it and think that, if they hadn't seen magic or didn't have a background in magic, they wouldn't be able to relate with that. So
Right.
I went into a maximum security prison because I wanted to find like the toughest, most aggressive environment where I could
Yeah.
show that these ideas work. And it was one I will remember that moment forever, because before the magic started, those guys were in there for life. They wanted they were tough and antagonistic and aggressive, and then the magic happened, and it was just like someone flipped a light switch, and you got to see a side of those people that I think is probably harder to see in their normal life in the prison.
I saw that clip, and one thing that that I just think to myself is that I know there are people that strive to deliver magic in that way, and I also think that like there's plenty of magicians that are silly or wacky or whatever adjective that I don't think would have been able to break those guys in the way that you did. And if someone was listening to this and they were like, I want to impact people like that, what kind of tools can you advise to them to make that sort of visceral magic experience
Yeah.
unencumbered by other
So let's
things?
just talk about tactics for a minute. I'm afraid that this isn't going to be a satisfying answer, but this is the answer. Intent matters far more than ability. And audiences are so good at figuring out what you want from them. And so much magic is crippled by the fact that what the magician actually wants is praise. They want approval. They want the audience to think that they're cool. And the problem with that is the audience wants to feel cool. They want to feel good about themselves. They don't want to, their job is not to lift up the magician and make the magician feel like it was a good idea not to go to law school. The magician's job is to serve the audience, not the other way around. And in the prison or in the theater, you will get far more impact out of the same tricks that another magician's doing if you really look at why you're there and do the inner work that you need to do so you can think of your performance as a gift to the audience rather than a gift of attention from the audience to you. And I can't tell you how to do that. I can't, because everyone's life is different, everyone's circumstances are different. Put yourself below the audience rather than above them, and just see what happens. See what happens when you do the same material but you're presenting it to them as something you want to share with them. If I had to give one tip, it would be that would if we
Intent.
stop
That's
in
amazing.
intent is so much more important than ability. Like if my life depended on taking a non-magician and turning them into someone who could share the experience of wonder and astonishment with an audience, if that's what was my mission, that's what I had to do, I would give them the simple, give them an invisible deck and spend all of the time that you might spend teaching a more elaborate trick, talking about the inner game of magic and of sharing experiences with an audience. Because I think that's where you really can pour fuel on the fire.
Totally mind blowing. Number one, is there any magic book that talks about intent in this way? And you can say you don't know, but I've never heard anyone talk about it like
I,
this.
I don't know, but I mean, I think when you look at the way some magicians approach their art, like I just know that Tommy Wonder cared about his audience. And I read those books of wonder when I was 13, and it just I still haven't gotten over them. The fact that he presented 3 different methods in increasing levels of ridiculousness in order to further refine the experience he's giving to his audience. Like of course that's a gift he's giving to the audience. Same thing with David Berglas, who would spend months laying the groundwork for a piece of magic that would feel impromptu and might only be seen by a dozen people. Like of course that's a gift he's giving them. So I can't think of anyone who's verbalized it like that. But I think when you look at the work of great magicians, you can see in their obsessive attention to detail. And
That they're thinking
yeah,
about
right.
this. Yeah. And my other question with this is, do you remember when or where you were or for what reason that you discovered this? Because this seems like a real big thing for magicians, the me to you, in performing. And it seems like something where one beats their head against the wall for a long time until they figure this out. Do you remember when and how this idea like clicked for you?
I remember when I got it most wrong, and I felt the shame of that very heavily. When I was in high school, I staged this huge show, and there were 600 seats in the auditorium, and we sold out 3 nights, and I wore a tuxedo and had, because like there were no other magicians who came through Ames. Like we saw the Copperfield show, but this was before YouTube. It was before the internet. So I didn't really know. The only magic I saw was on TV. And so I thought, oh, Lance Burton has a tuxedo and that's working for him. I should do that too. So I put together this huge elaborate performance, and at the end of it, I remember thinking, this has gone wrong. This isn't how it should feel. This isn't the goal. Dancing around on stage. Maybe it works for other people, but this is not right for me. What is the furthest from this I can get?
Do you recognize when it felt super wrong? There's another idea that I want to explore about being on stage that you sort of tackle in a very similar way. So, in the book, Here is Real Magic, you compare a magician to a filmmaker. And at first, you talk about it being like, how could I possibly compete with? I don't remember what movie you were talking about. I think you're talking about Michael Bay. But, I think, how could I compete with Avengers, right? Like, and literally, maybe a month ago, I was doing a show next door to a Cineplex the night of Avengers. And this feeling was really visceral. Like, how do I compete with a $1 billion budget or whatever, like with my card tricks? Like, how could I possibly do it? And then you sort of come to what your answer is and what your conclusion is. So, can you share what that is?
I get a mileage out of the framework of thinking of magic as fiction. I don't want the audience to think what I'm doing is real, but I do want them to feel that it's real. In the same way, when you're lost in a novel or a good movie, you're not noticing the special effects as special effects or the supernatural elements of a book as supernatural. You're right. You're just overwhelmed with the story and everything feels real. I think as a stage performer, that has been a useful way for me to think about what I'm doing, because it addresses the problem in my mind of, well, what am I trying to get the audience to think of? How do I want them to see what I'm doing? Am I really trying to get them to think I can
Right.
read minds? Well, no, I'm not reading their minds, so I don't want them to actually believe that. But I want them to, I want all of the power of that belief without any of the questionable intellectual duplicity, And so
Right.
anyway, that, your mileage may vary with that, but I guess the overriding thought is clarity of vision leads to clarity in performance, right? If you know how you want the audience to think about what you're doing, you will be an effective communicator in helping them get there. And if you
Right.
don't know, like if you haven't thought about that, it will feel muddled to the audience because it's muddled to you. I remember pretty early on thinking that it was important for me to stand in front of the mirror and nail my double lift so I could do it anytime perfectly. But it was as important for me to go off and just go for a walk, or go to the library, or go to the coffee shop or whatever, and just think through what's actually going on. The technical skills are important only so far as they allow you to express your aesthetic goals and your artistic goals. And if you haven't thought those through, the technical skills aren't going to save you. Like those are means of communicating. They're not the thing that you're trying to say.
So let me ask, what if someone is into this and doesn't have goals in that way? Like what if somebody is like, I love doing magic. I want to like connect with people. I love that moment when the magic is like singing and resonating, like really in it. Like we all know what that feels like. But like, what do I want to tell the world? Does that mean just sit and figure out what you want to use this opportunity to do? Or do you understand what I'm asking?
I do, yeah. And I remember when I was young reading, I think it was a book by Eugene Berger, and I wanted to just throw it across the room. I love Eugene Berger's work, but he was saying, use magic as a way of expressing yourself. And I was frustrated because I thought, well, what if I don't know what to express? What that's no good to me as a platitude. Like, how does that look in my daily life? And here's the solution that I've come to. And I, I wish that I could have come to this as an 11-year-old or a 12-year-old, but in many ways, this is the whole ball game. You have to make, as part of your work as a magician, completely saturating yourself in the works of great artists throughout history who are not magicians. And this will be different for everyone. But the only thing I would say is step out of your comfort zone a little bit. And, you get plenty of popular culture just through your daily life. So who in the classics, or who in the, if, like, I remember when I was 24, there was a period of time where I listened to Beethoven's Seventh Symphony every day. I listened to it every day. I just sit there because I wanted it to become so deeply saturated in my imagination that when I went to then go create something, I wasn't doing it alone. I had my sort of taste shaped by this great piece of music. And I did that with so many other things. Bob Dylan music, I read a lot of old Russian writers, and I tried to grab onto the works that were maybe above what I perceived to be my intellectual capacity,
Right.
with just assuming that if I just like learning the pass, right, or a good cull, or a false shuffle, like magicians are really good at getting better at things because you have to be, right.
Hmm.
Every sleight of hand move is something where you just have to start over and learn it. And so you just stand in front of the mirror and you practice and practice and practice, and you can do it. You can do the same thing with reading. You can do the same thing with listening to music. And for me now, the entire ball game is just soaking myself in geniuses throughout history, letting their work really shape who I am and how I think, and all of the things that art can do. I want it to do to me, not so that I can say, oh, I'm going to go create an illusion that is like what Tolstoy's doing in War and Peace, or what Beethoven, like that is pompous and ridiculous. But if you just take that work and let it move you for its own reasons and in its own ways, you can't escape from it when you go and make your own work. And so if you don't know what to say, that's fine. Just take solace from the fact that we live in a time in history where the great minds are all available on your phone for free.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
and prioritize with your practice a sort of artistic and intellectual and aesthetic exploration, and figure out what you like and what you don't like, and why you like it and why you don't like it. And your message and your story and your ideas will come, I promise you.
I love that. And I especially love what you said at the end there about the practice, which is many of us hope that those visions will just come. Right?
Yeah.
I liked what you said about, allotting just as many hours of looking in the mirror as you did pondering what you're doing and what you're saying, and the experience and visualizing what's happening. And that all is just as important, and often neglected. So I really like that.
I don't think I can overstate how important reading good fiction is, because good fiction is
Mm.
essentially, it's a way to practice empathy, right? Like you're connecting with these characters and seeing through their experience, what their world looks like, and how that matches up with what your world looks like. And I don't know. I'd put some of the fiction that I've read above importance, above some of the magic books I've read, in terms of how it's shaped my thinking about being a magician on stage.
Are there one or two books specific that you can recommend?
I don't think so. I think you got to find. I think it's different for everybody. I'd hate to
Right.
give a reading list because everybody's different. Everyone's background's different,
Yeah.
and but go find yours
Right.
and wrestle with them.
I love that. I'm jumping a little bit all over the place here, from one book to another, but trying to stay on one sort of topic, which is in the other book, Clouds and Kingdoms. I guess I didn't really explain the difference. So Here is Real Magic is sort of the book for lay people. This is the one that you can find at a bookstore. And then Clouds and Kingdoms is a book for magicians, which there's only 1,000 copies of. It's got, like, what is it, 5 or 6 effects and a whole bunch of theory.
So let's just talk about this for a second. So we've been talking for half an hour. It's one thing to speak of magic in this way as an ideal, but it's another thing entirely to find a way to put all of that in the work. And, there's that great, I'm going to get the line wrong, but the idea, it's from Darren Brown's book, Absolute Magic. And his sentiment is having your aims and priorities right is important, but unless you can find a way to make it real in the work, it doesn't exist, right? It's just good intentions. I love the thought of finding a way to put all of that on stage in my show. And so Clouds and Kingdoms is a handful of effects that I use in my show all the time, and it breaks down how I've thought about taking these ideas and bringing them to life in pieces that you can go out and perform.
I was going to ask you a specific question about it, but before I do, I'll just mention a few things about the book. So the first is I can say with 100% certainty that you are being honest in saying that these are the tricks that you do in your show for a few reasons. One, there's giant high res images of you performing them for audiences going crazy all over the book. Number one. Number two, they are tricks that if you understand what you are reading are miracles, you know. And I bring that up not to just talk about the quality of the tricks, but like right now I am in a search for like new material, and it's very hard to find material that isn't just like wow. We joke in my circle in Toronto called like the $100 test or the $1,000 test, which is you do a trick and you say to someone, how does it work? And they say, I don't know. And then you go, okay, $1,000. If you think they can guess how it works, and it's probably not a good trick. And I think all of the tricks in this book beat the $1,000 test, and they're really, really great. So I was about to ask a question, but really, I don't want to miss the opportunity to just like mention
No,
it,
go on and on,
how
please.
amazing this, how amazing it is, and I'll tell you, a few of the tricks are have made their way on stages and things that I'm really enjoying doing.
I'm thrilled to hear that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's really, really fun. But my question was this. So I almost don't want to. You had a few ideas in that book that made me like absolutely like totally blew my mind and made me like look at things again. And one of the very last things in the book, which is almost too good to share, but I do want to talk about it, is you brought up how you couldn't believe that comedians beat us to the punch.
Yeah.
And that part, I had chills down my spine. Can you reiterate that idea on the podcast?
The idea was, I guess, coming at through the whole book, but certainly in that essay at the end, a magician has to reveal far more than they conceal, right? That you are either using your craft as a magician to share the truth as you understand it with the audience, or you're just sort of lying to them, right? And so I was in that essay talking about how other arts have found a way to play to their strengths in a way that allows those artists to talk about the things that really matter in a human life. You know, think about a writer or a poet or a musician or a comedian can talk about love and fear and death and God and sex and politics and anger and injustice. And that gives their work a universal resonance because everyone has those things in their life, and everyone struggles, everyone's having a hard time, everyone's trying to do the best they can. And for a long time I struggled with magic because I'd see the other arts being honest about that, and then magic was just happy to skim along the surface. So I've spent a lot of time thinking about how can I take my craft as a magician, but allow it to have the depth and the tactility and the sort of the reality behind it that all of those other arts have managed to express in their own way. Does that make sense?
Yes, and is what you found sort of what we just went over, which is like focusing intent, like planning that out, or is there something more, or maybe another strategy that you've used to help inject, or rather like better share something about the world through this art?
Yeah, I mean that's I think maybe a very long conversation, and in Clouds and Kingdoms, I didn't want the work in Clouds and Kingdoms to ever get bogged down in theory, right? I
Right.
wanted it to be imminently practical, tactical tools that could be used to help sort of free those ideas in a performance rather than cover them up behind, like you mentioned, comedy or music earlier on. And so yeah, so it's material that has been sort of hyper optimized
Mm-hmm.
for impact at the expense of like I admit that one of the ways that I try to do that in my work is rigorously look for. So the question I love is how can you make an effect better by making it harder? Where am I taking a shortcut? How can I work 200% harder to make it 5% better? which I'm happy to debate the merits of those decisions in a commercial magic environment where your job is to do as many shows and pay the bills. But I do as many shows as I can, and I pay the bills. And I think
You still do a lot of work to make the things
yeah,
happen.
right. Like the bet that I'm making, I guess, is that it's far more practical giving people a moment of genuine wonder than it is saving myself $40 from checking a bag on the way to the airport. Or like I don't know when Pax Flat plays big became such a battle cry in the world of professional magic, but you don't see it in the other arts. You
Right.
don't see.
Yeah, and also like you just said, we're out here trying to maximize impact, right? I think about whoever works hardest wins,
Yeah.
right? Like the more that you can put into an effect, obviously the more impact. And that is really surprising to say, like, what can I do that takes 200% or 300% more work that'll give me 5% more impact as a strategy?
I mean, I don't think Yo-Yo Ma, the cello player, saves $75 in airplane baggage fee. He brings his Stradivarius. He doesn't just rent one locally. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I think especially with magic, where it's possible to divine success in a magic show by just saying, "Yep, I fooled them." And I feel like the other arts don't have that, the ability to just fool somebody and then move on. And so they have to do everything they can to make it a little bit better. And that has always
And we
made
have
sense
that
to me.
sort of fooling, which kind of feels like a checkbox,
Right, right,
which
right.
it shouldn't, because it's kind of a little bit more than that. This stuff is all great. It's really like helpful to me because one of the things I joke about is having this podcast. I get to ask the questions that I'm struggling with to the people in the world that I would never get to ask. And like big thing that you're talking about is intent, right? And that's the one that's really really hitting me here through all of this is focusing on what it is you're trying to do, what it is that you're trying to say. Do you think that magic can speak for itself, or do you think we should aim to have like a moral or theme or goal, or like, can magic stand on itself, or should it be used as a tool to say something?
Yeah, I feel like it's at its best when it does speak for itself, when it's not in the service of something else, but when it's just the best version of itself. Yeah, I'm just going to put a full stop there. Yes, I think when it's excellent, it can just be excellent.
So help me understand something. It's at its best version of itself when it is representing itself, or it's not striving to do anything outside of magic. So then put that in context with what you were just saying about the comedian, how in other arts they're like actually saying something, but we're not. How do you do both? How do you do magic that only speaks for magic but says something?
I think a lot about forms and like what artistic form is the best way of talking about a certain subject or issue. Like I remember when I was exploring all of these ideas as a teenager, I became really taken with the idea of, could you do a magic trick that's about love or sadness, or like, could you do a themed trick? And
Right.
and I came to the conclusion that maybe you could, but if that's what you want to talk about, why not
Play a
just
song or yeah,
like
yeah.
write about it or make a song? Yeah, yeah, play the guitar. There are maybe more effective ways to chase after those ideas. But the thing that magic's really good at talking about, conveniently for me, is the thing that I really care about communicating and sharing, which is wonder. And I don't, I and that experience of, I guess, whatever we mean when we talk about wonder, right? Wonder is sort of the right word, but it's not really the right word.
Right.
I was interested in that long before I was interested in magic tricks. And magic for me is a way of chasing that experience by sharing it and finding it on my own. And so I think, if what you really do want to talk about is love, or what we were talking about a minute ago, either learn to play the guitar or find a solution within magic that I couldn't find. but
Right.
but for me, I'm trying to chase after that idea of giving the audience that experience that you can have when you go out and see the stars.
I'm starting to understand what you're saying, which is that magic does share something, but the thing that it shares is usually in service of wonder as the thing that it is able to express, and not whatever. Like, politics or whatever. Magic innately is built to talk about wonder, or any of these other things that mean the similar thing as wonder, like magic or deception or illusion, or you know what I mean, like all
Yeah.
these things that all have that feeling, and that makes a lot of
And
sense. So I really
and
like
Jonah,
that.
I just want to clarify. That's how it is for me. Those are the answers that I've found. But do your thing, and your listeners will do their own thing. And I'm not saying that anyone's answer is wrong. I'm just talking about the way that I've come to the conclusions and the decisions that I've made. They're not even conclusions. Like, these are ideas that I'm still thinking about and chasing, and these are all open issues for me. But this is where I'm at now.
Yeah, I think all of us in magic are all like trying to better understand this like wonder thing, and it's amazing that you can have like a full career, decades in this, and like still not really get it. Like I still don't really get it. Just when I finally understood, now I'm on the other side of it, and and I don't know what it's like to be a layperson again. You know what I mean? Like, so it's amazing you can spend this whole life and not really get it.
But what a terrible thing it would be to get it. Like, it's good that it's a mystery. If it ever stops being a mystery, I think you're probably not thinking hard enough.
I wouldn't be reading all these books every day to get to the bottom of something I already knew. So I'm
Right.
glad I'm glad I'm still like confused and interviewing people and trying to figure it out. So I wanted to talk a little bit about being disillusioned. It's a very big topic and theme of Here Is Real Magic. And it's something that I know I've struggled with. I know many magicians struggle with. And it's this idea that like, maybe someone became a doctor because they like it's like so amazing to save a life, but at the end of the day, after waking up and saving lives every day, like it still kind of feels like going to work. It still kind of feels just like it did when you had to wake up and go to class or whatever work feels like. And then magic tends to have the same thing. We think that like even just saying our job as a magician, like it's so hard to express how not crazy it is by comparison to the look on your face when I say that I'm a magician. Like how mute I feel about this compared to how expressive you are about this. And there's so many parts about this disillusionment that I want to talk about. But one is just this idea in the book when you were talking about going on a trip and you're like, I'm not fun anymore. Or she's like, you're not fun anymore. Or you know what I mean? Like you used to be so much fun. And this idea that like we got into this thing because we love this joy and this fun. And now magic, it's like a job. And we're now doing this one thing that we fought to avoid, right? We fought to be in magic so we don't have to be in a job that makes us feel dead and not fun and whatever. So talk a little bit about this disillusionment, and then soon we'll talk about how to get to the other
Yeah,
side
I
of
mean,
it.
I was blindsided by the traveling salesmanship that came from professional magic. I just didn't see that coming at all. I grew up in a small town in Iowa. I still live in a small town in Iowa, and no one in my community or background had gone into show business. And so I had no idea what to expect. I have been touring with my show since I was 22 years old. And the first year, you go out and do 100 shows. The second year, you go out and do, a few more. And I was on the college circuit, which for me meant crossing the country. I think when you're successful, you can line up a tour where you sort of work your way around the country. Like you play Omaha
Mm-hmm.
and then Des Moines and then Chicago and then Indianapolis. And you sort of, there's a route to it. But when you're starting out on the
Right.
college circuit, you just go wherever anyone says yes. And so, like, there was
So you're just zipping
like
around back and forth.
Florida, Alaska, Virginia, California.
Florida again.
Yeah, that's right. I I didn't I didn't know. I mean, it sounds unfair to whine about it because I had that experience of getting exactly what I wanted at a pretty young age. Like growing up, I wanted to be a professional magician, and then out of college, I started touring, and I was off to the races very quickly. But it was far more like I felt. I used a reference to being a traveling salesman earlier, and that's sort of how it felt. Like I was
Mhm.
just on the road all the time, and there were about 75 minutes each day that I loved, unless the show didn't go well, and then even that I didn't love very much. Like it was just
Right,
it
right.
was rigorous in a way that I nothing had been rigorous. Like I had never, my first year on tour, I still shudder as I think about it. But then there's a second year, and there's a third year, and a fourth year, and I just got to the point where, for a magician, I had very little in my life that felt even remotely magical.
I want to talk about this because I know the feeling too well, and I only imagine that if us two know it, that many of the people listening know it. So, I want to explore this deeply, and then hopefully soon, the remedy, or at least what one can do about
Mhm.
this. And, I always think to myself, like, are we living the dream, or are we just being hired for the highest paying hourly job ever, right? And that's a phrase I stole from reading some business books about speakers. Just this idea of like the highest paying hourly job. And it's not that we built this different career, it's just that we still have to go to work just like everyone else. And it might mean that we have to travel 40 hours to go to work. And that, like, that shit sucks. So, what did you do to tackle that?
I mean, for a little while, I didn't do anything, and my shows got really bad. The special sort of liability that comes with magic, like you made the point earlier that a doctor might become jaded or cynical about, the profession of being a doctor, but I really believe that a magician has to believe in the magic on some level. Otherwise, it's
Hmm.
not really magic, right? Like that, you have to
Hmm.
understand with conviction why it is that you have chosen to spend your life sharing card tricks with people. Otherwise, your performance won't have the power that it needs to break through. My best shows are where I know exactly why I'm there and what I'm trying to share, and I can throw my whole being into it. There's that quote, wherever you go with your whole heart, or don't go there at all. I butchered that, but that's the message, and that's how I feel about performing. Like, if you can't be there with your whole heart, um, it's worth stepping back and thinking about why that is. But I was so young, I just didn't know how to wrap my mind around the fact that I had gotten what I wanted and I hated it. And so I just became more and more miserable. And there was one night, I talk about this in Here's Real Magic, where I quit in the middle of a show. I was on stage in Milwaukee at a college, and when you do college shows, probably no one will know who you are, but there'll still be 700 people in the theater because the college has been promoting the event. And so I remember I was on stage in front of a packed theater, and I just stopped in the middle and said, "I'm sorry, I'm going to go." And I went back to my hotel room thinking, maybe this is it. Maybe I'm done. This is not what I thought I would be doing. This certainly isn't magic. And I'd put the odds at about 50-50 that I just ended up working at Starbucks for the rest of my life, or whatever, but that's ultimately not what happened. But I can certainly relate to the point that you're making.
I definitely know that feeling. Not to give away everything, but just so I can get into some other parts, you basically decided to pack your bags and go to India. I'm reading it and a few thoughts are going through my head. The first thought is like, I've had these disillusioned feelings. I'm about 24 years old. Like, do I have to go to India? Like, is that what's going to fix this for me? Like, is that where I have to go? But really, I was just thinking to myself, like, what is the fuel that magicians should use to help bring this idea back? Because we all know, this thought that like the more magic you learn, the less you're fooled. And I agree with what you said, because it's our jobs to give these moments of wonder. Like, we have to believe it. We have to be a part of it. We can't be like, sometimes the secretary is sitting on the desk and she doesn't look as peppy, and that's okay. She still, but it's not okay for the magician. So what fuel do we use, or what does a magician use to awaken themselves back up to these feelings of wonder, or what it is that we're doing here?
So I don't know how to answer that for everyone. I can just tell you about how I started thinking about that, and my solution. I was either going to stop or burn everything I knew about professional magic to the ground and dream it all up again. Like, there wasn't really a middle ground. I was 26 when this happened, which is pretty young for a midlife crisis. I think it would have gone very differently if my wife had taken a different line or had felt otherwise. But a lot of my thinking about going to India was her saying, you know, this is something you're really good at. You shouldn't quit. What can we do as a couple to help you
Right.
find your feet? And if that means going to India, have a good trip, but like
Right.
do what you need to do, but let's figure this out because and that's the other thing. Like we did not have a lot of money. Like I needed to make this work. We all needed it to work.
Right.
And so it's funny to talk about going on this quixotic adventure to the other side of the world to search for magic as a practical decision, but it's sort of
Yeah.
I that's sort of how it felt. Like I've been chasing this thing for as long as I can remember. It has already led me to some very strange places on tour around America. That it happened to lead me to India, it just felt like a natural extension of that. Um, so I think in a maybe more practical sense for listeners who can relate to the feeling of disillusionment, but don't want to go to India, I will say that one thing that I discovered that really helped my magic is embracing other art forms as a creative release. Like when I went to India, I kept this journal um, that ended up becoming Here Is Real Magic because I discovered that I really could see the potential in writing, and I didn't know what it would become, but I wanted to get better at it. And so, in the same way that I, would practice magic every day, I just set aside a little time to practice writing and reading and developing that skill. The freedom that like just having one other outlet for my creativity was it took such a
Right.
pressure off magic to be all things. I was still sort of like trying to figure out how do I write that love song magic trick and the like, oh, I can be a writer
Right.
and then I'll be able to write about whatever I
Right.
want.
Then I'll know.
And same thing with
Right.
music. Like I have always been a musician, but I started embracing that as a very serious pursuit in the same way that I was pursuing writing, because having that weight lifted from, it's a lot to ask of any art form to be everything you need it to be. And
The burden of all of your mental.
yeah, right. And like look at Darren Brown. Like he's a world-class photographer. His street photography is just incredible, and he's a
Hmm.
great painter. And that he also happens to be the greatest mentalist in the world. It doesn't take away from the fact that he's also pursuing those other
I
disciplines.
love it. I mean, it's captured in like other art and maybe also other experiences. Like I feel like it's a muscle we can't let atrophy. This wonder muscle, or this muscle that keeps these things from falling into monotony or disillusionment. And I think we owe it to ourselves more than, like you said, more than maybe other fields might, to stay like alive in the belief of magic.
I will also say that pursuing writing and music has made me a better magician. It has clarified my thinking on what I'm trying to do and where I'm trying to go and how I'm trying to make an audience feel in a way that I think I didn't have the vocabulary to articulate or even think about in my own. You don't have to think of it as a separate pursuit from your magic. It can be
Right.
part of, there's that great John Lennon quote. He said, "More than anything, I am an artist. If you give me a tuba, I will get you something out of it." And I love that thought that you can chase the same thing you're chasing with magic through writing or through music or through painting or through photography or whatever
Hmm.
it is. It's just a different form.
I played piano as a kid, and then I started playing some other instruments, and I played guitar and harmonica. And I remember distinctly better understanding what the piano did when I learned an instrument that had less options, like the harmonica. Like, the guitar, they were explaining like, oh no, like, well, on a piano this is this. On the harmonica they said like, oh, this is only in one key, this harmonica. And I'm like, oh, a piano has, you're in all the keys. And I'm like, whoa, this is crazy. And that's what it made me think of when you're talking about like trying out other art forms, is like you get to see the breadth of what one of them can do against the other, and it really helps you understand how you can say things and do things. So that's great. Writing and music, those are two really great ones. There is I have a few more questions before we get to the wrap up questions, but this is really, there's so many things here where you're just answering my deepest questions, or at least sending me in the right direction. So this is fantastic. Um, there was a moment in the book. So first of all, one of the things about Here Is Real Magic that was really resonant with me is I'm very hard to impress with things that are woo woo, like anything that is and then it was, I'm just like, I'm very real. So you're telling me there's all this mysticism, and I'm like, okay, let me see,
Right.
right? And there were so many instances in the book where you were able to capture, or you were, sort of knocked off your socks by moments where people were very comfortable by the belief in science, but also in magic, and that idea came up a few times, as people being like, I am a believer in science, but then also there's magic. And then there's people pretending to do magic, but there's also this
Right.
magic. And it was an idea that you struggled with in the book. I struggled with reading it, and maybe I'm starting to understand the other side. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you understand that?
Yeah. Just to contextualize that for the listener who maybe hasn't read the book. I went to India because I happened to be reading this academic text about Indian street magic, and I decided that I wanted to just go see these things I was reading about. So snake charming, fire breathing, some of the classic pieces of Indian magic. I wanted to go put myself in the audience and feel the way that I used to feel when I watched magic. But when I was over there, I found that doing magic for the people I met was this incredible way of connecting with them, because I couldn't always speak the same language, and I was lost and I didn't know where I was going. But as soon as you do something impossible, you're no longer just a tour. Like it's like, here's what it's like. It's like working a cocktail party where you perform for one group, and then they say, "Oh, that's incredible. You got to see. You have to
Right.
show my
And then
friend," and
it's
they drag
over.
you across
You
the
go
room.
from no one knows who I am until, okay, now.
Yeah, so that's how I explored India. I would just, go to a market or to the river, or wherever I thought the focal, wherever I could. You can start anywhere really, and you do magic for someone, and they say, "Oh, that's incredible. My dad owns a tea stand down the street. Come show him." And pretty soon you're performing for the people at the tea stand, and it becomes a way to fall into the culture rather than just skimming across sort of the tourist version of that culture. But to your point a moment ago, so often I would run into this contradictory set of statements that whoever I was talking to presented themselves and thought of themselves as a science minded, rationally minded person that didn't believe in anything supernatural. And so I
Mhm.
could understand that, I can relate with that. And then they would go off and tell me all of these mystical things that they had seen. And I didn't know how to reconcile those two. I
Yeah,
didn't, in my background, those are two incompatible worldviews. And so how can they
totally.
live within the same brain? And the only answer I have for you in that regard is that I saw so many things in that trip that did not fit into my way of seeing the world already. I went into a slum and saw poverty that I still cannot understand. I don't understand it. I saw it. I know it's real. I still can't internalize it. And the same thing with things that I saw up in the mountains, or speaking with people in different conversations. That travel and magic are similar in their way to just deliver this cataclysmic death blow to any sense of certainty you have about the world. And
Right.
when I came home with the conviction that I don't really know anything, that my certainties are convenient, but it does not make them true. And whatever cosmology I hold is necessarily shot through with holes, and that not knowing is the only certainty that I can hold on to with any conviction. And in that way, in the not knowing, in the not having certainty, I can at least acknowledge the possibility of worldviews that I thought were incompatible living together. Does that answer, or at least approach an answer to your question? 10 minutes
Yeah,
later.
I definitely better understand how to internalize that and how to understand how to work with that, because that was definitely something that I found myself scratching my head on the front side and saying like, how can they feel that way? And but one of the things that I'm really, getting from you is like, part of our work as magicians is in the realm of this wonder and this things we don't know and this, and like playing with that stuff, whatever that means, right? But just like not being static in your views of that, like I know what exists, I know what doesn't exist, or whatever. Like it can be so rewarding for what we do to be able to like chew on it, right? Like chew on the ideas of wonder and what is real and what is not, and don't like feel confident in whatever you've arrived at.
The late great Anthony Bourdain once said, "The more I see of the world, the less I know about it." And that just feels true with my experience in India. And I can't prove that that's how it is, but that's certainly how it is for me.
Definitely, the more you know, the more you realize how little you really know. It's our curse, but it's one that I'm happy with.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about one other thing before we start getting wrapped up. And this is in the same vein of disillusionment, but I guess it's a different magic struggle. And that is, I heard you talking about performing on stage, and you said like, it feels more like a bar fight or a boxing match. And that resonates with me. And I don't know if I'm misphrasing this, but you said something about like not wanting to or not liking to like step onto that stage, but like wanting those moments and doing this all for those moments, but not necessarily loving to step on the stage and it feeling like you're about to step into a match or a bar fight or whatever. Talk to me about that feeling. What does that mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think, look, people get into magic for different reasons. And I think some people pursue magic because they like being on stage and they like being performers, and that's appealing to them. And for me, that was always more of a liability. Like that was something I had to get used to rather than something I was just naturally drawn to. So even now, like when I go on stage, it feels more like I'm going into this battle with the part of myself that doesn't really want to do it versus the part of myself who really wants to share this thing that I have to say with the audience. And on the good nights it works. And I've also found a way to sort of use that tension as a way to give the performances a sense of power or urgency. Here's what it is. I love seeing performers punch above their weight, like try for more than they are really capable of achieving. Like I remember I went to this concert once and I saw the singer. The song was building up to this one note, and I was close enough to the stage that I could see the singer getting ready, and you could tell it wasn't easy. It wasn't polished. It was going to take everything that he had to hit this note, and that tension, um, that conflict between his ability and his aspirations just gave the performance this electricity. And when the moment came and he sort of swelled up and reached up and hit the high note, the room just exploded. I love that. And so in my own shows, it's okay that I feel a little out of my element on stage because I've found a way to use that.
The feeling is one that I know too well, which is like, I love doing magic and I love that moment with people, but I don't like jumping on the stage. It still feels bad before I do it. And it's something that I really struggle with to settle with myself because I'm like, it doesn't feel good. Is this the right career for me? Like, aren't there people who love this part? But I love the magic. I love doing the magic, but I don't like going out there, right? Like, I don't know. It makes me think of swimming lessons and jumping in the cold pool, right? Like, it never feels good. Like, I don't know. Do swimmers get used to it? Like,
But Jonah, I think that's actually a real asset because I mean, just to go back to where we started with this talk, audiences can tell when the performer is there because the performer wants something from the audience rather than the other way around. And I do think like if it's okay to be afraid before a show, it's okay to want to run out the back door and get in the car and drive away. And it's okay because um, if that's how you feel, that's fine. You can still get on stage and share what you have to share anyway. And um, eh, I have two young kids, and we talk about bravery because it's hard to be a little kid, and how you can't choose when you're afraid, but you can choose how you respond to that fear. And I think about that a lot before shows. That I'm a pretty private person. I don't think under other circumstances I would go up in front of 700 people to do magic. It takes a pretty good reason, but the magic is a good reason. I have so much faith in my material and affection for my material and what I am able to share with that material, that's why I keep coming back.
I hope that a lot of the struggles and challenges that I brought up in this help people that are listening that have gone through them, and that maybe that if they need it, they can use a clip or a moment or even a reminder or a note from this episode as a remedy, or at least an arrow to help them reset their sights in the right direction if they feel lost. And that's one of the things that I really enjoyed from both of the books, is that I felt like it was speaking to me as a magician who was lost and struggling and looking for the same thing, you know? So I really, really enjoyed this. And we'll get to the wrap up questions, but I just want to say both of these books, I think, are required readings for a magician. But really specifically, Here is Real Magic. As soon as you're feeling like you're struggling, that's when you should start reading that book. But I mean it, like, as soon as you're having these feelings of disillusionment, like, I think it really helped open my eyes in that direction. And I really, really love that. And if you're looking for some real hard hitting magic and some great theory in the same kind of mind as this stuff, definitely go check out Clouds and Kingdoms. We are nearing the wrap up section. The first of the wrap up questions is the modern magic. So, what is something happening in the Magic 2019-2020 world that you like, and something that you don't like?
Oh, I mean, I think this is magic's new golden age. I think this is the
Mhm.
greatest time to be a magician because what magic has needed for so long and what it is finally getting is this influx of people from different backgrounds and circumstances who have found magic just through the fact that you can learn magic on YouTube. There are people interested in magic now who might not have found their way to a magic shop or found their way to the L&L publishing catalog. And magic right now is having its electric guitar moment. Music changed forever. The first commercially available, like, widespread electric guitar was the Fender Telecaster. 20 years before, the electric guitar was invented in the 1930s, but in the 50s the Telecaster came out, and Hendrix had one, Janis Joplin had one, Dylan had, like, everybody had a Telecaster, and music changed forever. And I feel like Magic's electric guitar moment was, David Blaine's special, where suddenly you don't need $1 million in a Las Vegas stage. You just need a deck of cards and an imagination. And it's taken, just like it took the electric guitar, it's taken 20 years for that to work its way into the culture, in a way that it's available to, a teenager learning magic tutorials on YouTube. But we're there. And I can't wait to see what happens over the next decade in magic. I think it's just going to blow everybody away. As for something I don't like about magic, I mean, I've got to say, I'm pretty far removed from the magic world. I live in, like, I live in a small town in Iowa. I don't really go to magic gatherings. I'm pretty much just doing my own thing. So I don't really know about the magic world. My hope is that everyone just does the best work they can and tries to do their thing. And I don't know. I guess that's not a very interesting answer, but I don't spend a lot of time on magic websites or
It's a
on.
plenty informative answer that you don't know anything bad in the magic world right now because your brain is in other places.
Yeah,
It's plenty helpful.
I've
Yeah.
got stuff to do, man.
Yeah,
I don't
listen,
know.
I get it. I get it. And also it's not uncommon that people who are performers who spend a lot of their time performing don't spend a lot of their time checking out what's latest at Illusionist or Murphy's. People that like that sort of stuff and are focused on that sort of stuff do. So different strokes, different folks. And also, like I said, is helpful to know that you spend your time doing other things. That's why you have 2 books, 2 books on my desk. The next thing is the endless chain. So in order to keep the podcast going on for eternity, each guest is asked to recommend another guest that absolutely must be on. You are part of a chain already, so let's keep the chain going. Who should we have on? And the caveat is you have to be able to put us in contact. You can't just say David Cobb.
Have you had Wayne Houchin on?
We have not.
Wayne is
He's
just
awesome.
unforgivably good at magic. Like he's just, if I think about my favorite magic of the past 25 years, like an uncomfortably high percentage of that comes from Wayne Houchin. I love his material so much. We got to work together in London for a couple months, and hearing his thinking about magic, Wayne Houchin for sure, and another one. Are you familiar with Rory Adams?
Rory Adams. I know that name.
He's from the UK, and we worked together on a TV series a couple years ago, and I was stunned by the creativity and the perspective that he brought
He
to magic.
did he do The Only Ideas? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's Rory Adams' book. Yeah.
Fantastic. Those are great recommendations. And Wayne, actually, he was around in the early days of me in magic up at the Sorcerer Safari, the magic camp in Canada. So that'll be a fun throwback. That's very exciting.
Cool. Great.
Yeah. That's a great recommendation. And the next one is the take-home point. The take-home point. So that's, people have been listening to us talk for like an hour and a half, basically, about loads of different subjects. And when people think back to this episode, if there's one thing to distill for them to remember when they think about this episode, what's that thing for you?
Oh man, that is unfair. I think like the single silver bullet that has mattered the most to me is to prioritize plenty of time just appreciating the works of other artists who are not magicians, and like go to the library and check out 5 novels that you've never read before and just live with those for a while. And I think it's a slow process, but yeah, that has mattered so much to my work.
I love it. Go engage in some art. Go read a book. Go find some
and buy like 2 or 3 copies of Clouds and Kingdoms just in case.
Yes, and buy both Here Is Real Magic and Clouds and Kingdoms. Here Is Real Magic. Again, my quick thought about it is really cool. It is a book that I can actually recommend for magicians, but is built for lay people, and it's about magic. So that is really cool about that book and really helps with the disillusionment thing. And Clouds and Kingdoms, strong material and basically the kind of brains that you hear in this episode, that book is filled with. So you guys would really love it. Nate, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. This was fantastic. So much fun for me. Where can people find you on the interwebs?
That's a good question. I'm not really... Yeah, it's funny. I have a website, but I would say that the thing that is coming soonest that they should check out is just my YouTube channel. There's nothing has been there for a while, but that will change shortly. So Nate Staniforth on YouTube.
Coming soon, Nate Staniforth on YouTube. Nate, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me. This was such a pleasure. And of course, a big thank you to everybody at home who joined us, listened in, and learned a little bit about magic.
Thank you, Jonah. I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. See you all next Thursday. Well, there you go. I hope you liked the episode and I hope you learned something. Take a moment and think about intent. I know that idea of intent really helped me in working on a trick, and actually having this conversation, this episode with Nate, helped me break through on a new script, because I really just changed the intent for the audience and I changed to what I was focused on delivering, and it helped me edit the script, and it really, really helped in the performance. So take a moment, think of one of your tricks that's maybe not working, and think about, is the intent right? Is what you're trying to say, what you'd like to say, actually that feeling that you're saying, and what can you do to tweak that? Once again, if you want to check out his Clouds and Kingdoms book, go to cloudsandkingdomsbook.com. And if you use the coupon code Discourse, you get 15% off as a little thank you for being a part of the podcast. Thank you so much for being here. I hope you liked it, and I'll see you next Thursday.